So here we are, another episode of Grind My Gears, and I have the wonderful Melissa Lantsman on with me today. Thank you for joining me and doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And one of the things I just wanted to bring up right away is like a lot of people in politics don't like to do these kind of conversations. So I really do appreciate you just taking the time to actually to come out and do something like this. It does show a lot about who you are and who you represent. So I just wanted to
Sure. Well,
thank
we'll
you.
see how I feel after all of this.
No, no, this is a fun podcast. It's not one of those ones. But the first thing I wanted to say, I just wanted to point out that you have the best hair in politics. I'm just gonna put that
I'll
out there.
take it.
Yeah,
I'll
because
take the contest.
yeah, my wife's a hairstylist, so I can appreciate it every time I see you in the house talking. I'm like, you know what? She's standing out just from the hair.
I'll take it.
Does it take you a while to
And
get into?
hopefully we'll stand out from what we're saying. So I think Canadians need to hear it, and I'm glad you're doing this.
Yeah, and like I said, I appreciate that you are so vocal and you're very in touch with the community, especially in your writing as well. The first thing I wanted to kind of touch on is like what got you into politics? Because I know like you were with Stephen Harper doing that kind of stuff with him as an advisor role before, and then you kind of went back to the private sector. Like, what drove you back into the chaos?
You know what? I've always had a foot into the chaos because I think the chaos matters. I caught the political bug super young, and my parents will tell you that I probably wasn't smart enough to be a doctor, so I had to choose something else. And
Yeah,
and this is one of those things that you can really change your community. You can change the country. You could probably change the world if your trajectory is right. And you can have you can have that voice for people who I think have been left out of the conversation and who feel pretty voiceless.
yeah, and your journey in politics has been kind of a different one compared to some other people where, you know, I mean, let's just call it like it is. Some people are born into politics. It's our little Prime Minister. Well, I can say it. It's my show. That douchebag. But
Certainly you can say whatever you want. But you know what? People ask me this all the time. So sort of what's the path to get into politics? Like, what do you have to do to get into what you're doing? And there really is no clear path.
no, yeah,
My path is not like a clean one. I didn't know what I wanted to do since I was 5 years old. I didn't necessarily, I wasn't born into this. I didn't go to the right school, but I had super supportive parents,
yeah,
like typical immigrant family, who was, after they decided that I wasn't going to be a doctor and tried to push me into
yeah,
all of those things. They were like, you got to do what makes you happy. You got to do what you're good at, and you've got to do it well and work hard. And that's the family that I come from, and I think that's the family that that I'm going to create.
yeah. And why conservative politics? Because I mean, I know like the day and age we live in, most young people come up, they're more on the liberal side of kind of things, and then as like the old saying, as you get older, you get more conservative. But you seem to be have at a young age associated yourself with the Conservative Party and those ideologies. How did that come about, and you be able to kind of keep those ideologies throughout kind of the chaos of your life?
You know what? It's because I think it's what's right and what makes sense. But I come from a mixed marriage, and I say that
Yeah,
my mom was a staunch liberal. And my dad was always quite conservative, and my parents came from a communist country. So
yeah,
the understanding that life, wasn't like this for them, where in the place that they came from, and that they chose this place because of the freedom and the liberty and the ability to work hard and get ahead. That was always ingrained, really, really young. And I found myself in the Conservative Party from a values perspective,
okay,
from a difference between right and wrong, and from a way to getting to the end point, by way of sensical policy making decisions that take care of people.
yeah. And now, when you're growing up in your household, was it more of kind of was there more debates as to which side is right or wrong, or
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think I think your parents always try to have, try to do the whole lessons at home type stuff. But
Yeah.
I also grew up in a unique circumstance. My brother's 10 years older than I am. So
Okay.
when you've got two kids in the house where there's a difference of age that big, the conversation's always centered around the level that my brother was at. So
Yeah.
it was either keep up or, get out. And there was no video games and there wasn't a whole lot of TV time. So it was a really interesting way to be part of the conversations that were probably outside of my realm of understanding at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up a little bit different because both my parents were immigrants, but they're super liberal. And then as I got old, like, so everything was like, oh, when you are of age to vote, go vote for liberal. So so there was a point in time where I was just like, whatever, I'll just do whatever. And then as I kind of got older and I started having my own family and faith, I sort of was like, no, that's a dumb way of thinking. The other thing that I kind of clued onto is a lot of the time they would complain about a lot of the policies. And I'm like, well, you voted for that. So why are you
Right.
complaining about the policies? And to this day, I mean, I don't think my mom listens to my show anyway, but to this day, they still do the same crap. It's the same thing. And I'm like, well, you voted for that. That's the direction you chose that you wanted to go. So you have no right to complain when things go wrong. So I, as the rebellion, because I
So
did not.
you're a conservative because you're rebellious.
No, I'm not. It's not. I'm not conservative because I'm rebellious. I'm conservative, obviously, because of my values, and like me and my wife are strong Christians, and our values align along with that. But I'm more of I just saw the flaws in the policy making,
Sure.
when as I got older, and you have to start paying taxes, and you have to start doing all these adult things, you know. It changed my mind. Where because I come from that immigrant family like you do,
Yeah.
and one of the flaws, and I see it now, especially with how policies are bringing in immigrants the same way. Like at our church, we have a ton of Brazilian immigrants, and one of the thing I see that they do quite often is because a certain administration brings you into the country, they get married to I have a loyalty to,
Right.
like, so for example, when my parents immigrated to this country, Trudeau's dad was in power, so
That's exactly my story.
they feel like they owe him something when really it was not him that brought them into the country. It was just Canadian immigration uh, policy in the first place, right?
I could relate. My parents came in through Trudeau Senior, and that was my mother's allegiance to the Liberal Party. It was all based in the very fact that they were in power when she came in. But truthfully, her values, and I also come from a family that looked at religion as the backbone of our
Yeah.
community and the way that we were raised. All of her values were actually conservative ones, but she couldn't square the circle on it.
Yeah. And, and I want to be full disclosure in this conversation because I am a strong conservative supporter for a long time. My wife is the same way. Actually, she's even more conservative than I am. I'm willing to have conversations, whereas my wife's like, "This is the way to." She's a pastor's daughter, so you know how that goes. But one of the things I've had a hard time with over the last 2 to 3 years is um, the Conservative Party on the federal level, and this is my opinion, and in my circle of people, which is pretty big. I think if you learn about, we're in the martial arts community, MMA fighters, so a lot of like-minded individuals, but underrepresented in terms of politics. Because for one, fighters don't care. The martial arts community doesn't care. We're all inclusive. Like, we don't give a shit about politics. When you go into the gym and you see the hundreds of people in the gym, nobody talks about politics. But one of the things I've noticed is, like, somewhere along the line, the conservative values in the last 3 years were a little bit changing, especially with Aaron O'Toole, where it was more of a centrist kind of approach as opposed to a traditional conservative view. And this, and I'm gonna full disclose because I'm an honest person. I tell it like it. In this last federal election was the first time I actually didn't vote conservative. I didn't vote NDP or Liberal because I'm not crazy, but I actually went with Maxime Bernier, uh, particularly for one reason, not because I generally believed in all the policies that they wanted to institute, but because of during the turbulence that we experienced in the last 2.5 years, it seemed like he was one of the only people standing up for, um, you know, against a lot of the stuff, the mandates, all that kind of the lockdowns, and he was very vocal about it. He put himself out there. Same with Roman Baber, who's also a candidate for the leadership. So that was the first time I did it, and it kind of hurt my heart because I do, but it was the first time I really didn't see the direction that the Conservative Party was heading into. Do you see that now with this new leadership race going on, and that we can restore that voting faithful back over? Because I would love to, but I have some,
Yeah, look,
reservations.
I think it's much bigger than that. I first of all, yes, I do think the leadership race provides an opportunity for conservatives to not to reimagine who conservatives are, but to start to talk about the vision and what we'll bring to this country that is drastically different than what we're getting now. Because I think the country is directionally in the wrong place. I
Yeah,
think we both agree
yeah,
on that. And to put a solid alternative forward about how we are going to govern this country in a better way, to be more competitive, to be more visionary, to be the place where people want to come and live in freedom and liberty, and work hard and get ahead and do all of those things.
yeah,
But I think the world's changed a lot more in the last 2 years than it has even in the last 10.
yeah,
Uh,
100%.
right?
There's more. Like, I mean, traditionally before COVID, this podcast would be done in person. I just find it's a lot easier to do it like this for everybody. But like everything used to be done in person. Now, like, I mean, let's talk about. We'll go back to what you're saying in a second. But like, for example, the Parliament, like, guys are fucking taking a shit. Excuse my language. They're taking a shit on camera, right?
Yeah,
That
look, I just it is the decline of democracy, of transparency, of ability to hold a government account, which is one of the things that a democracy is supposed to be about.
yeah,
I think virtual parliament. I've argued against it from the second that I had to participate in it, and I generally don't
yeah,
because I think it's such nonsense for you to stay up in your office and not answer the question for question period, at least for that hour a day. You have the most powerful people in front of you in the country,
yeah,
and they're supposed to answer questions about why they made the decisions that they made to affect people. And the fact that they don't have to come downstairs, or they could take it from their living rooms. And I get it. If you've got COVID, you can take your 5 days or 10 days or
yeah.
whatever it is. But come to work. You
But
signed up
yeah,
for this.
yeah. If you're not sick, get your ass to work, right?
That's what, look, everybody else has to do it.
Yep, exactly. And I think what it kind of provides is, the old, the social media saying where, everybody's a tough guy behind the keyboard, right? It's very easy to, not have to play off the emotions, and like I've seen some of those sessions where they're yelling and screaming, and let's face it, Trudeau's unhinged. He, like, if you had to force him behind a camera as opposed to having to be in front in there, he would say a lot less stupid shit in front of the camera as opposed to when he's in there. Because when he's in there, I can see it in his face. He has a hard time holding back some of the rhetoric and stuff that he normally does in front of the camera. Whereas when he's in front of you guys, he has to put on a brave face because his ego. Pierre said it in his interview with Jordan, with Jordan Peterson that he did last week. Like, he's an egomaniac. So when you force and as a martial artist, I understand this completely, because people walk into the gym and think they're tough guys all the time,
Right.
and we get to humble them in a nice way. I don't beat the crap out of them, only a little bit, right? But I get to see ego in its front and center. Like, I'm so experienced in this game now that any average human being, when I walk on the street and I look at them and I have a 20-second conversation, I can tell automatically this person is trying to prove something. That guy has such a big ego. He has to be there, because if not, he can keep suppressing it behind the camera. You know what I
You know
mean?
what? We would probably be better off if there was more MMA fighters in the
Uh,
House of Commons. Not for the fighting part of it, but just from what you just described. I'm going to tell you something, and I'll be honest with you, and I'll be honest with your listeners.
yeah,
The hardest part about politics is having the discipline to either take the higher road, go down the path of an issue that isn't popular, or just not saying the things that you want to say. Like
Yeah.
I've got a pretty open personality. I like to crack jokes,
Yeah.
and having the discipline of not doing that on Twitter, or not
Oh,
doing
it's
that in
hard.
response, I think is one of the toughest parts of, you want to give the sarcastic answers because sometimes the response is so stupid or so
Yeah.
so outrageous. But you just got to sort of take it on the chin, and know that there is a goal in mind, and the goal is, in my case right now, it's lifting the mandates, it's stopping the restrictions, it's clearing our airports from a policy perspective, and me getting the shits and giggles on a quip back is
Yeah.
not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's hard. Like I've been brought up the point before where Ashton, you talk well, you should go into politics. There's a few reasons why I have a young family, so I don't know if I want to expose them to the dark side yet. And then also too, I have no filter. I'll say that's why I'm doing what I do. This is why I'm in fitness, I'm in martial arts, and I do a podcast. So I don't think I would be able to sit there and look at that. Like I have to give almost everybody in that house props because they're like part of me in my head while he's talking. It's just like punch, 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 punch. We got like I just want to. That's all. That's all they like because of just how he is and how he carries himself and what he's done. But going back to what you were just saying about lifting the mandates, and I want to get to more of your expertise and what you kind of work with. We obviously have this big issue in the airports, and um, I have a few clients that I work with who just recently traveled and said it was a nightmare coming back 4 or 5 hours. They spent more time getting out than in the actual plane on their vacation. But when it comes to the mandates, my big thing is, you know, why were these mandates even put in the first place? Because we talk about ending the mandates, there seems to be some other motive going on behind why they're keeping it. Why is this, and I can say they'll censor me, but whatever. Why is the vaccine so important? We have such a high rate. We have such a high vaccination rate. I know plenty of people who've taken it, plenty of people who haven't taken it. Even Bill Gates at the Little Evil World Economic Forum said, if there's breakthrough infections, what's the point of a passport, right? The science isn't settled yet, even though Del Duca likes to say that kind of stuff on TV. Why are these, like you put it in the house, of why are they vindictive? Why is it so this vindictive attack on a certain group of Canadians still going on?
Yeah, look, I think at this point there's no other explanation, because it's certainly not one that is based in science, or if it is, nobody is willing to share that science, or
Yeah.
there is no reason that the science is somehow different in this country than it is in so many other countries that have either lifted those mandates, or didn't have them in some cases.
Yeah.
I think at the outset of this, I will tell you, and most people know that I'm pro-vax, and I've made that decision for
Yeah.
myself and my family. But at the end of the day, the mandates sort of were put in place to get that vaccination rate even higher. And having sort of a historical rewrite on them in any other way, I think seems it seems silly at this point, because the mandates came into play at a time where we knew the virus had become something that was so transmissible. Like the mandates were brought in at a time where Omicron was the most prevalent strain.
So
And
would
so knowing that that you could spread this, that you had breakthrough infections, and still doubling down, there is no other explanation for it
yeah.
than ideological, control, vindictive. I've used words like punishing, because I truly believe that is what the government is doing, because nothing else makes sense.
Do you think? This is how I view it. It was the mandates were a form of coercion into to doing it instead of making a conscious each Canadian making a conscious decision to do so.
Yeah, look, and we'll have a good conversation on. I think the government, the prime minister ran the last election with this as a wedge, and I think it's
Yeah,
one of the most disgusting things in this government's tenure. And there's lots of disgusting things in my view, but at sort of at the end of the day, if we know that this doesn't make sense, and we know that other countries are doing it, and we know that it's now causing problems to travelers and businesses, not just your boys that are going on vacation.
yeah,
We're talking about people coming here from New York, from Philly, from Chicago to do business in Canada because
yeah.
that's what we want. We're talking about people going to funerals and birthday parties and life
Co-
events. We're talking
conferences, all those kind
yeah,
of
we're
things.
talking about communities that don't have another way of connecting. Like you can't get everywhere here in a car, in a bus, on a rail, on a ferry.
No,
Sometimes you need a plane. So for those people, it's we have this policy that eliminates 5 million or so people out of something that is that is mission critical.
yeah.
It's not just a vacate of Florida.
Do you think that like I know that in the house, what's that guy? The French guy is the health minister.
Yeah, his name's Minister Duclos.
Yeah. Now he one of the things he does, and it's a manipulative tactic, is he always likes to bring up the U.S. The U.S. because we saved this many lives, but Canada's population is significantly different from the U.S. And so relating the two numbers, like I'm not a statistician, but I know accountants and statisticians, and they've said that it doesn't equate. You can't use such a drastic population difference and make the same reference. Why hasn't that ever been called out before?
Look, I think it's a tactic. I think it's been it's certainly been called out in the sense of like that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the efficacy of a vaccine. We're not talking about how many people potentially it saved. We haven't had the conversation yet on how brutal these lockdowns have been, how they've been on mental health, how they've been on a large uptick in use of opioids, how they've
Yeah.
changed an entire generation of people, which you don't have to go very far to see. I speak to people every day whose teenagers are not the same, who we've, because of a health decision they've made. I spoke to somebody yesterday, they've killed their kid's hockey career because they've
Yeah.
lost out on 2 years and they can't play. And these are these are just
The tip
the
of the
government
iceberg. Yeah.
sees these as a minor inconvenience, and this is what's happening all around us.
And I think that's where the public is frustrated, e.g., why the convoy and all and those kind of things continue to happen because during this whole time, and I think it was preached a lot, um, politicians still made their paycheck, but regular folk like my industry was targeted specifically,
For
fitness
sure.
industry. I was lucky that my business model allowed me to operate without a gym, right? Without having a facility. I was very lucky I could, but if and I tell this story all the time. In 2019, me and my wife were going to make the investment and open up. And then I had the paperwork on my desk, January 2020. And something in my head was like, no, let me just wait. And I didn't. If I had signed that, I would be in a totally different position I would be in right now. And what I think the public and where there's a discourse between government and people is government wasn't affected. The paychecks still came in. Whereas average for and they keep saying, well, we gave the CERB. Well, the CERB doesn't make any sense now that inflation's so high. Any profit that you did make from the CERB, say you made a minimum wage and you took the 2,000, but you only made 1,600. Well, it's gone now because the price of inflation is so high. Um, why is there such a big disconnect between people who are in office and regular folk? Is it because they just don't take the time to actually go out and do things in the community and see?
For sure. I think you nailed that. Um, I don't think that most people in Ottawa talk to anyone outside of Ottawa, and
Yeah,
I've only been there for eight months to see that. I think it's much bigger than that. It's not only that government workers, sorry,
no worries.
government workers didn't take a pay cut. We celebrated people that we needed at the beginning of the pandemic when we knew nothing, when we
Yeah,
had no vaccines, when we had no sort of safety precautions in place. We
yeah,
made them go to work. We celebrated truckers. We celebrated grocery workers. We celebrated, servers until we sort of shut everything down. We celebrated the people that needed to make our supply chain work at the beginning when we needed the stuff that we needed.
Yeah.
Those taking vaccines off of a truck, or those taking masks off a truck, or those making them. And then we decided somehow, a year and a half later, when we knew what we knew, that we would ostracize those people,
Yep.
that we would make them others, that we would discount everything that they did in the pandemic while we celebrated them, and ostracize them from society in such a way that doesn't make any sense, because
Yep.
they didn't want to do what I thought was a good decision for me.
Yeah. And I mean, when we come back to these mandates, and I know that you operate on the federal level, but I think provincial has a lot to do with how people view federal politics as well.
Yeah.
Um,
For better or for worse, depends on where you are.
Yeah. But for in this case, for worse, because we look at two conservative-run provinces, Alberta and Ontario, and the two premiers who supposedly supposed to be conservative were almost flip-flopping on the issue of mandates and vax passes, and eventually went to them. And it almost seemed like they caved under the pressure to Trudeau, to the public. And now that we're having a provincial election, I don't see the Ontario PCs working as hard to say that we want to end the stuff that we brought in, right? Because there's still people getting fired in Hamilton region and all those kind of things over mandates that, are not, for some of them, there's no vax pass. Why can't they go back to work? Why has on the provincial level, they've taken that, the Conservatives taken that approach, and then federally, why hasn't the federal Conservatives kind of spoke out against that almost?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's go 30,000 feet on this. For Conservatives, COVID is a killer issue. And I say that not just because of the single issue vax mandates or vax passports or anything that has to do with that.
Yeah.
COVID has allowed government and government intrusion in your life, the thing that we don't like as conservatives, to get out of control. Yeah. Our spending is out of control. The idea that you would turn on your TV every day and listen to some guy at a podium that you've never listened to before tell you whether you should stay home or eat in a restaurant. Like, we've never had that kind of relationship with government. Yeah. I've never turned on my TV and listened to a politician about whether to go to a restaurant or go to a gym. And all of a sudden that happened. So for Conservatives, this was a killer issue, because we had a responsibility on public health at the beginning when we didn't know all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it was sort of these lingering effects of it that needed to keep up with much more left-wing governments across the country and across the world. And if we weren't doing those things, we looked irresponsible as conservatives. So this was never going to be a winner for us. But to your point, I think it could have been less of a loser for the people that are part of our base, that are part of our movement. And now more and more people that are not part of our movement, that are seeing what's going on there, is totally void of common sense.
Yeah. And going back to why did they not say anything to the provincial leaders that were like, it almost seemed like at one point they're like, no, we won't do that. It's against rights. It'll cause division. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, sure. Let's start some division up in this joint. Right.
Yeah. Look, I mean, part of it is, I think, a division of responsibilities. Like, we don't necessarily tell them where to spend their healthcare dollars or how to create their education policy. Although there is sort of strings attached to the big taxman collector pile of money that comes down. And then for a lot of these local situations, like, look, COVID was different in different places. If you lived in rural Manitoba and you watched the news in Toronto, you think that we all had, COVID, and we were, totally, like, licking each other and everybody was passing it around. Yeah. And if you lived in, in sort of a country that was agricultural, based, where you don't see very many people, this is like, right? So local decision making has to play into this, where you're not going to make the rules. You're not going to make the same rules in southern Manitoba or in the northern parts of Alberta or BC as you would in a city where you live in a building in a block of 45,000 people.
Yeah. I see that point. I just think for for the voting base, the ones that say they vote provincially conservative and federally, I think they have a hard time dealing with some of that
I,
leadership
I agree with you, and we're seeing a
that
lot of that now out
yeah,
there, right?
it's a big disconnect because traditionally, if I voted conservative, say in the province of Ontario, I would be glad to vote conservative for the to federal. But it almost seems like to the base, it's that they're not talking to each other. They're all doing a different thing, and it needs to be rectified in terms to bring that trust back from each province because uh, let's face it, Ontario pretty much speaks, and it's unfair, and I feel for people in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but what goes on in Toronto and the GTA in terms of voting and seats, and Quebec, it pretty much dictates the rest of what happens to Canada. And even though the Conservatives lost that last election, they won the popular vote both times, even with Scheer, right? And it shows that that's where I was kind of going with is the divisiveness that's going on in Canada. We like to dismiss it. We like to say, "Oh no, we're not divided." But in my opinion, I think we're way more divided than the U.S. Right? When we look at our party structure and the fact that more than half of the country pretty much dislikes the current government, did for the last two elections, but because of how seats and how parliament is formed, they're pretty much thrown out. If Toronto and Quebec vote Liberal or NDP, it's pretty much how the election goes.
Yeah, it's a real reckoning that I think the Conservatives, have paid attention to and need to pay more closer, or I should say, closer attention to, and that includes the 905, and it includes the Lower Mainland of Vancouver, and it includes some seats in Montreal, where frankly Conservatives aren't at play at all.
Yeah.
But and I think that was what you saw as part of the strategy of trying to get in, trying to bring more people to the Conservative base. But I will say this is we win when we're actually conservative. We did that with Stephen Harper. And our message resonates with people, particularly at a time right now where there's a lot of anger out there. You said it yourself that you can't ignore the trucker convoy as a bunch of fringe yahoos. That's not. That is a big error, a strategic error for the Liberals that I think Conservatives, if done smartly, will capitalize on.
Well, I mean, it's the name calling. It was name calling, and
for sure,
like I know
misogynist, racist.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't like to pull the card, but I'm a brown dude. I'm not freaking like I'm a minority too. Like, what are we talking about here? And I think that going back to that trucker thing, it wasn't only about the truckers. That frustration was felt on all levels.
Absolutely.
Like for example, people, I've never seen this before, but people in like the fitness industry absolutely hate the current government.
Hairdressers who were maligned for causing COVID, right?
Yeah, my wife's a hairdresser. Like, I'm surprised we did super well just because of hard work during this time. But if we didn't put ourselves together, both of our industries were literally brought to their knees.
Yeah.
And like my wife said, it's the first, like in the hairdressing industry, in that industry, typically they're Liberal and NDP, but she's noticed that a lot of them are speaking out against that kind of stuff because their whole livelihood got torn apart because of it, and nobody seems to give a damn, right? They won't even no mention of it whatsoever. It's just like, hey, whatever, we screwed you over, but deal with it.
Yeah, like I couldn't, I feel for your wife because I think that industry, like I could think of nothing else that was more maligned than the hairdressers in our province, and they were blamed for causing COVID. I actually go to one of these. I go to a hair salon where everybody in there is somehow conservative and has become conservative because of this issue, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing a lot more than that, particularly amongst young voters. And we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to make our party relevant in a way that it's never been relevant before. Not just grievance politics of, we're never gonna, the pandemic and all of that, but just to this is a government. This is a Liberal government that promised young people that they would have a path forward. And life's gotten more expensive. You can't buy a house. You don't have any, your rights have been taken away. I mean, you got pot. You got the
Yeah,
legalization of pot, but beyond that,
which I'm
there
glad
was
for. Huh?
no promises, right? Like there was no promises that were kept to young people, and I think there is a bit of a wake up call happening.
Now, with when we come back to that division, the topic, like I know specifically, and you've reposted a video about Trudeau likes to deny that division is, and what he always does, and it's classic. Like people don't like when I bring this up because it brings up some of the stuff that happened in Germany. It's classic propaganda that the propaganda minister used there, just brought back into a more friendly form to how he uses it. But what he always does is he is like, I don't see the divisions. Canadians, I can regurgitate his bullshit. Oh, like without like I don't even have to study it. Like I know Canadians have always been there. They stepped up. He always brings the vaccination event stuff back. They got vaccinated. They've been helping their neighbors. That's not the case. That's not what is happening. Canadians are frustrated, and what these mandates and this has clearly done is it's caused two separate sides, right? And especially where I live in the Young Eglinton area. You can smell the tension the minute you walk outside. There is tension everywhere where somebody is looking at another person like, oh, this person's not wearing a mask, they're a bad person. This person's wearing a mask, they're a bad person. This person took a jab. There's they've created this anxiety, and it's fueled by media as well. But there's this constant anxiety and it's pitting Canadians against each other to the point where I grew up here. I've never felt this kind of hostility in Canada before. Does the government even recognize this? Because every single time it's brought up by you specifically too, you've brought it up. It's the same regurgitation of crap
For sure.
over and over and over.
Yeah, look, the politics of division for the Liberals has, in their mind, has worked,
Yeah.
and they've pitted Canadians against each other. They've othered an entire group of Canadians, and like we said at the beginning of this conversation, like it's gross.
Yeah.
And I think that more and more people are starting to see that this isn't based in any kind of science, or at least any kind of science that's available. This isn't based in any kind of protection of public health. This is now this is now negative campaigning in the midst of a government cycle.
Yeah.
And then we haven't even got to this, but they a marriage with the NDP to allow them to do this up until 2025. Like if I'm an NDP, or if I'm even a member of parliament from the NDP party, I don't even know how I look at myself in the mirror every day.
No, and I am quite open when I say this. Is like this is the first time in the history of the years on this planet that me and my wife have considered moving, like literally picking up and leaving Canada.
No, we got to get you to stay.
Yeah,
we need you to stay.
I know. People, but like, it's become such a toxic environment. Like, I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Like, I don't want to send them into that kind of place. I actually I have my old head coach when he has a business out in Niagara. When the second lockdown happened, he sold the business, picked up, and moved to Belize, and he's loving life down there right now because it's free. It's small government. They don't really try. They've tried to do some of the same kind of restrictions, but they can't control it there because it's obviously too small. And it's a shame to say it that a third world country is experiencing more freedom than Canada right now. And and just as a Canadian, I'm like I want that. So do I have to pick up and leave to get that, or do I have to?
No, the answer is no. I'm going to make my pitch for you to stay, you and your family to stay. Look, this is the best country in the world, and it's provided so many fruits. If you work hard and you want to get ahead, you can in this country. I'll tell you, there's lots of things wrong with it, and there's lots of things we want to fix.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the questions that I constantly ask myself about this country is, how do we do so little with so much? We have so many resources, natural resources. We grow so much food. We can feed the world. We can be energy independent. We've got the smartest workforce. We've got, wicked good educational institutions, universities, colleges. We have the ability to build things here, and yet we squander that.
Yeah.
But I would never, ever in a million years sit here on this podcast and say, you should move to Belize because the opportunities are greater there.
Yeah.
It might be, it might be a reprieve from the time in history that we are in right now. And it might be a vacation from the frustration that you are feeling, that so many are feeling. But never forget that this country is amazing. And I think it's up to us, the next gen, to make it more amazing for your kids.
And I agree with you. It's just, and that's the thought me and my wife have had, but I also hear it out in the public too. A lot of people who are conservative, they're being like, well, they've never had to think about this before. They never had to think about the fact that I might have to relocate just to be able to live life the way I wanted to live life.
Yeah, and we've had lots of friends that have, they've gone to Florida, that have gone to Texas, and all of those provide, certain goodies based on what your family's looking for.
Yeah.
But your kids today, 2 and 4, literally can do anything they want in this country. They could be anything they want. And we've got to create the environment so that's actually true.
We got to fight for it a little bit, right?
Totally. Don't run away. Fight with me.
I'm gonna fight. I'm staying here. But the thought has crossed our mind, and it is something
it's a sad one.
Yeah, and that's why I bring it up, because to me it shows when lifelong Canadians have to think that way, it shows a failure of government, right? It shows a failure of government on all levels, in my opinion, that, it's become that way that, regular Canadians feel like this might not be the right place for me. And I do love Canada. It's given me so much, and I never wanted to leave up until now, where I'm just thinking about it, right?
I get it. It's a frustration, and it's an anger, and it's one that man, we got to pay attention to.
Yeah. And going into that is we look at the cost of living right now, because that's another factor that influences people's decision to move as well, right? The cost of living has skyrocketed to the point where, for people with average incomes, and I've heard you argue with the current government in the House about this. You need $200,000 jobs just to be able to afford a house, right? My Costco, like I go to Costco, my Costco bill has doubled for the same shit. It's the same shit. I'm not buying anything different. I buy baby crap and adult crap, and and it's doubled. Now I'm in a position where, fortunately, even though I see the differences on my bill, I can afford to deal with that, whereas many Canadians can't. Many young people can't. What in the heck are they even doing to fix it? And what is the conservative government trying to do to help it? Because it seems like nobody gives a shit at this point. Excuse my language. It seems
look, I could understand why you think that, because we've lost control of spending, and do not make any mistake about it. The inflation and the inflationary pressures and the rising cost of everything is due entirely to a government that has spent beyond their means. To a carbon tax that is ideological, to gas taxes that they're laughing about. They want this to happen. They want you to stop driving your car. So I don't know why they don't own it. I don't know why they pretend to care about it. This is exactly what the plan is. They want you out of your car, so they want to make gas too expensive. I think the price of a home has doubled under their tenure. You know what's gotten cheaper under the Liberal government in the last 7 years? There's only one thing.
Pot?
It's the cost of money.
I was gonna say weed.
The only thing. I have no idea how much weed costs, but I'm sure there's inflation on that. But the cost of actual cash has gone down, and when you print more of it, you devalue it, and that's at the core of it. That's the problem. So the next conservative government might be a very unpopular one, because there's lots of things that we need to do to get this to get this country back under control and to really have an effect on your grocery bill, on your gas bill, and on the fact that 2 and 4 over there at home are going to need a house one day.
Well, what you said is completely different than what they're saying, because like Jagmeet went on the news yesterday and was saying inflation was caused particularly by corporate greed. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense, right? I understand corporate greed is a part of everything, but I'm a capitalist. I understand the supply and demand. I understand supply chains. I understand the cost. If gas is going to keep going, if the price of oil is going to keep going up, it costs more to ship things and bring stuff in. They're spending more, so they have to charge more. It's simple economics, right?
For sure, it's a trickle down, and we've talked to everybody, and they say the cost goes down to the consumer. There's no
so for him to use that cop out, I feel like it's a government cop out of them trying to just sweep it under the rug. Well, yes, corporate greed has to do with a lot. There's a lot of corporate greed going on everywhere around the world. It happens all the time. Look at what's happening in Davos right now. That's a big pit of corporate greed at the World Economic Forum. But how can they sit there and Canadians, like, how can their base accept the fact that that's the excuse that they're giving? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, look, part of it is I think there is a real disconnect between the NDP and what their base is. It was one of the worker, and they don't speak for the worker. And now it's sort of the downtown Toronto woke NDP of whatever issue makes it sound good. Banks make too much money. The end of the things like that. At the end of the day, a lot of these corporations are providing sort of the jobs and the stability in the economy for having people work there. And there is some concern about how that looks and how they're automated and all of that. But at the end of the day, you can't spend more money, print more of it, and expect that it's going to be valued at the same way. Yeah. And you don't need a degree in economics to understand that this is not sustainable, that the bubble is going to burst. And either we're going to have higher interest rates, which seems that it's coming, or we need some kind of plan to get this under control. Yeah. And I don't know why nobody says it, but that's the harsh reality of what we're going to face when we've decided that balanced budget and fiscal responsibility are something that we don't care about anymore.
Now, what are the Conservatives' solution? I know that there is a leadership thing going on, but
there is
as
little thing.
Yeah, as a group, what is the consensus of the kind of solution that you guys would put forward going into the next couple of years? Should you guys take the?
Yeah, look, I think the solution is different on sort of every one of those issues. I mean, the cost of living crisis it permeates into every part of life. So on the price of gasoline and the price to drive, like we've said it, we've committed, we're going to drop the carbon tax. It's 11%. We're going to pause the GST. They voted against that. That's another 5%. So 16% right off the top on day one of your gas price to today. On housing, we've talked about ways to increase supply and not double down on these programs that nobody's using or nobody can use. So I think it's there's a different solution in all of that, and on much of that, much of the direction is going to be set by the new leader, and it's an incredible thing to be going through a leadership where we're engaging more Canadians, ones that have never looked to the Conservative Party. So we're going to get some ideas from the ground floor about what people are feeling.
Now, in terms of that race, I actually like a lot of the candidates. Pierre, obviously, he's a talker. I think of all the people in that race, he's the one that can bring Trudeau's ego to the floor. Like, I can see him.
He's your MMA, like when you choose a fighter on the video game. Like
he's the Conor McGregor. He can talk you into an emotional area.
I know that reference.
Yeah,
so.
he'll talk you to the point where you'll make a mistake and he'll pop you for it, right? But the other candidates, one of the other ones I like, but the only one I don't. There's two that make me question. Is the Charest character and Patrick Brown. Now, Brown for me is very, very. It's hard to put it without being rude about him, but very.
It's your podcast. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, fuck it. He's very sleazy, right? Because we have somebody here who's the mayor of Brampton, and clearly was caught breaking his own mandates and rules, and then denying them, and then going into a leadership race, still denying them after there's clear evidence that he's not a man of his word and not a man of integrity. He clearly wants you to do something, and then he's going to do something different. And then we have Sheree, who's out there publicly bashing the truckers and anybody who had any sort of, support for them. How are these candidates even, allowed? Because it's just from the get-go, it almost seems like the two of them don't have the same values as the conservatives should.
Look, I think you're a big part of where we are in our sort of conservative base, and I think part of that is growing the party. I think at the end of the day, as somebody who sits in the Conservative caucus, when I think about these things, I think about who's going to hold our party together, who's going to bring Canadians the vision of what a responsible, hopefully, majority Conservative government is going to look like for Canadians. And I have some real questions about whether it's those two or some others on that stage can hold our coalition together.
Yeah.
And that can truly deliver, the fundamentals of a Conservative government the same way that, in my view, the same way that Stephen Harper did, or the same way at the time that Brian Mulroney did. And it was a different time and a different government and a different set of issues.
Yeah, and the other three candidates, Baber, Leslyn Lewis, and Poilievre, I think they have, or Polyev. I keep pronouncing his name wrong because it's very French, not a Frenchie. But they, I think, in my opinion, have the most level head for the position. And to me, I was very thrown back by the fact that Leslyn, she checks all the boxes off. Like in terms of woke culture, she's a minority, she's black, she has all these things. Whereas I thought she was a perfect candidate in the last time when O'Toole was there. What do you think that she would speak to a different kind of base that the Conservatives aren't really used to having?
Yeah, look, I don't choose candidates because they're women, or I don't choose candidates because they're black or they're white or they're brown or they're purple or they're green. Like I don't just, that doesn't, it doesn't compute into me. And I realize that people want to see something else in the Conservative Party. But what I look for when I look for a candidate is someone that's going to hold our coalition together, someone who can explain to Canadians, why they should vote for a party, and somebody who's going to expand our party into touching people that have never given us thought. People who kicked the tires on us and just didn't buy the car. I want them to buy the car this time. Yeah. And for me, I've been clear about it. I think there's one candidate in this race that I think checks all of those boxes, and for me, that's Pierre.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of his, but I will say this: I'm not 100% sold yet. But and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying it.
Well, we'll talk offline.
Yeah, we'll talk offline. But I would like to hear some more about him from you. But what I was trying to go with that is people are looking for something different in this Conservative government coming up. And with everything that's kind of gone on in the last 2 years, I think accountability is one of the most important things. Would we be able to, do you think that with the current slate of candidates, we would be able to hold them accountable for their actions? Should they do something that's
I think our party's always has always done that, and we have processes in our party that allows for that. Like we've got a really deeply connected membership and conventions, and a caucus that has this tool. Yeah. Like you forget that we have this tool called the Reform Act, where we could say, if you're not doing this right, you're out. Like we just did that, right? Like as a caucus. So I think there are lots of tools to hold people to account. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that we are not fighting each other as Conservatives, because that's when we get in trouble. Yeah. We are trying to replace one of the worst governments in Canadian history. And I have a front row seat at it now. And it's incredibly frustrating to watch them evade, divide, stigmatize, and be completely outside of what you would think an opposition and a real democracy should hold them to account with.
Well, like even I know you have to debate, what's the transfer guy, Omar Agbadar?
Minister Alghabra.
Yeah, Alghabra. I can't look at him without laughing. He looks like a brown Mr. Bean to me. I'm like, how do you even sit there and debate these guys? And the stuff that they're spewing is sometimes it's hilarious. like I have to give kudos to politicians because like I said, I'm a loose cannon. I wouldn't be able to even hold that joke back. I'd be like, yo, I can't look at Mr. Bean talking like that to me. It's. I mean, I know I'm trying not trying to insult anybody. I was just like when they say these things, I'm just like, how are you guys? How do you keep it in? It's very
Yeah,
hard.
look, we discussed that in terms of like it's pretty hard to have the discipline, but it is even more shocking to see again that the most powerful people in the country who are making decisions who affect our everyday lives are completely unaccountable to any kind of opposition or scrutiny. Let's not even start with the media that gives them a complete free ride.
Well, that's what I was
There
going to
is
touch on next.
nobody, yeah, like there
Yeah.
is nobody in this country that can get an answer out of that Liberal government that is satisfactory for the many Canadians. And that's why you're seeing the anger that you are seeing that is bubbling up, that is going to be a rude awakening when the Liberals decide to trigger the next election, because
And
they will decide.
yeah, and going into the media, like I think one of the biggest topics, not just in Canada but in North America in general, or maybe not Mexico. Mexico doesn't care about stuff, but censorship, right? There's an extreme censorship, and especially it's geared towards conservatives. Anyone with a right-leaning view or on the right, um, it's geared towards religious sectors, specifically Christians, geared towards people who speaking on vaccines. Uh, what do we have to do to fix that? I know like Pierre is very vocal about ending the defunding the CBC, but how did it get this far?
Because it was it was created like that. It's an on purpose thing. It is funded by government. It is not a business model that succeeds on its own. And I think the one way that conservatives have successfully and will continue to successfully to break through that cycle that is not favorable for us and frankly irrelevant to big segments of the population. I don't know how many people a little bit younger than I am are watching the 6 o'clock news or the 8 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news or any news at all on TV.
Yeah.
The breakthrough is the ability to break through social media, and Pierre's done it brilliantly for a Canadian politician. He's got a reach that is far beyond what Lisa LaFlamme or whatever the CBC national is, however many hosts they have now. I think there's plenty of people paying attention to other sources of media, and that's the market's going to speak. That's going to be the killer. And what we need to make sure is that the Liberals aren't regulating the internet on deciding what you and I can see.
Yeah, Bill C-11. That's what I was talking about.
Bill C-11. Like, man, we can do this for another hour.
I know. I know. There's so much crap to talk about. But do you think that Bill C-11 was specifically designed to silence the opposition?
Bill C-11 was specifically designed to make sure that the government decides what you see on and not see on the internet. And no matter how many times they say that's not the truth, it is the truth. That is what it says in the legislation. It is the CRTC. That's a body that is arm's length from the government that governs what's seen on TV, radio, all of that. They've not done the internet. They can't. They're not even capable of doing the job that they already have, let alone the one that they're about to get. And deciding what you and I see, what content creators like you, deciding where that comes onto my feed or how popular you are based on sort of likes and who's seeing it, that has an effect on what we're going to see here, and that effect is produced by the government. It is censorship in every way that you look at it.
Yeah, and even the big tech companies have come out and spoken against it. Google,
for sure.
Google, Twitter, the most woke company on the planet.
Absolutely.
Like they've all spoke out about it, and I mean it's a huge problem. And I think
it's a huge problem for people like you, right?
Yeah, it's a huge problem for people like me. But I mean, like I'm not even somebody with a gigantic reach. It's a huge problem for just content creation in general. Right. And people who are willing who want to speak out and just even forget speaking out, just express their opinion. But why aren't Canadians kind of wising up to it? My biggest issue is like, there's a lot of Canadians who don't even know that this is in play. Like this bill is in play. If they had known, they would be against it. But because of the way media is run, they can't get that information. How can the conservatives make sure that that information
Look,
does
it's
get to
it's
them?
continuing. It's continuing to hammer that in every single day of debate. It's continuing to pick it apart. And right now, it's in what's called committee, and I don't expect anybody to know how the process in Parliament works. But it's calling witnesses. It's making sure that more people are on the record saying how dangerous. The government intruding on the internet actually is, and I think that people are waking up to it. And we saw a lot of debate on it. And, the best thing that we can hope for right now is that we can keep it from passing before the summer ends and that we have some timeline on really exposing its
Yeah.
dangers.
Now, this is a little theory I have before we wrap this up. But do you think that when C10 was put in and then it got thrown out, do you think that the election was triggered because of the technicalities that can reintroduce it, because like they couldn't reintroduce it because it was thrown out under the current government that they had? Do you think that that was one of their motives of doing it?
Well, I think their motive was plain and simple. Let's divide as many Canadians as we can on the issue of vaccines to try to get a majority. That's all it was. And you know what? The plan didn't work.
No.
And the plan is less likely to work the next time. So we've got a job to do as conservatives to bring forward a vision of what the government looks like. But these guys gambled and they lost on their gamble. So instead of getting the confidence of the voters, they bought the confidence of the NDP, and Canadians should be livid about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up. The one thing I wanted to just say before we wrapped up is you made a quote on the conservative website, right? That government can't solve all our problems, but government can empower Canadians to help build a prosperous and secure future. Um, is that something you still stand by, given the turbulence in the party and the transitions that they're having? And is that something that we can look forward to you keeping to promote?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm fundamentally at the end of the day, I think less government in your life is a better
Yeah,
thing. And if we think that you're gonna solve all of the trials and tribulations that we all feel every single day in our lives, I think you're dreaming of what government as actually is, and it shouldn't try, and it
yeah,
shouldn't get in the way.
yeah.
I like your hat. Nobody cares. Work harder.
Yeah, you can
Uh,
get one on my website.
Yeah, maybe I will get one on your website
On
because that's exactly, I think, the feeling that is captured up there, and to pretend that you care or to pit people against each other in some ideological weird experiment, making people think you care. That's not right either, and that's
yeah.
what we're seeing.
All right, and that's Melissa Lastman. So I wanted to thank you. First of all, thank you so much, because it's very hard to get people like you in that position to just open up and have an honest conversation. So thank you for taking the time and speaking with me.
Thanks for having
And,
me.
and can you just let everybody know where they can find
Yeah,
you
go
on
to
social media?
melissalantsman.ca, and I'm so easy to find on social media. Just type in my name, and we're now on we're now on TikTok. So
Oh no,
I'm learning that.
don't even bother. I don't even bother with that. All right, so I just want to thank you again, and that's been another episode. Grands make yours, and I'm out. Everybody, thank you for watching. Please do me a favor, click the like below, share on YouTube, share on Instagram, share on Facebook, spread the word so I can keep creating more content for you and keep providing you with a great podcast experience. Peace out.